From a professional soccer career to becoming a driving force in the mortgage industry, Brian Covey has shown what it takes to find your competitive edge. Get off the sidelines and get in the game. Find your competitive edge with Brian Covey.
What's up, guys? And welcome back to another edition of Finding Your Competitive Edge today. So this is going to be a great episode. It's one of my friends, and I've started to hang out with and starting to get to know him very well. I'm going to tell you guys, you're going to want to buckle up because not only is he a former pro baseball player, but he's the EVP at RAC Financial. He's got his own podcast, so I always love interviewing other podcasters, the Hitstreak. And then just recently, SiriusXM, y'all-ternative. If you're not from the South, you may not get that, but we're going to unpack that today. I'm curious, and you guys are going to probably want to know this, how does a pro baseball player turn into doing all these things in financial services, run a successful insurance company, have a podcast, speaking on stages, do all of these things, and oh yeah, he's a dad and has 2 kids. So how do we do all that and manage it today? We're going to unpack that. We're going to get into what does it look like for you to go pro in your own life. So without further ado, welcome my friend, Nick Hyder.
What's happening, baby?
Dude, you get the podcast voice. I was on your show, so we're going to reciprocate this because I had a blast, man. I'm going to tell you what, I love going on shows and meeting cool people, and you're one of those people I got to meet through this. Not just brand builders, I know we do that, but athlete. We're going to have a lot of things in common today, but let's give everybody just a quick 30 seconds of who Nick is. So in case we missed anything, I don't do the long bios, but I'd love to hear, what's your 30 second on Nick?
So we still have the insurance agency that's still kicking butt. That goes under the flag of Team Hyder. The EVP of RAC Financial, that's merchant services that you mentioned before. Host of the Hitstreak Podcast and the voice of SiriusXM's y'all-ternative radio station. That's a blast, man.
Dude, that's really cool. So you've got several things, and I love, a lot of people today are trying to figure, okay, where do I go with what I've started? Maybe they have experience being a former pro athlete. Maybe they played in college somewhere. How did you get into insurance and any of these merchant services pieces? Where did that start for you?
Insurance, I found that was a God thing because I was lost and had nothing else at the time. So that was a God thing that saved my life. The merchant services thing is just as you evolve in business and you learn and you grow relationships. That there was a company that there was an opportunity for me to take all the things that we had learned in the insurance space and everything else, all the businesses that we'd ever had, and apply those in building out an amazing field force. And that's what we're doing at RAC Financial. So we're having a good time.
Dude, I love it. I see you guys everywhere. And what I love is, some of my friends, and you know this, being athletes and all of that stuff, and then taking that, we often get the question of, okay, hey, why are we doing sports? Because some people may never go play D1, may never get to play professionally and all that stuff. But do you think there were lessons that you learned from growing up in sports and some of that discipline that now applies today?
100%. First of all, in sports, you do it for the majority of your life, and you may never get paid doing it, right? You do it for the love of it. And but the baseball is a great game because of the life lessons and literally at the highest levels. If you fail 70% of the time, you're considered one of the greatest on the planet, right? So it's it's what you do the next after failure. It's can you leave that failure behind and focused on the next play, and that's a great life lesson.
Dude, I love that. So the next play, I've heard that said before. Let's tweak the deal. Talk to the people today that maybe are dealing with that. Maybe they just had a setback. Maybe they had something that was there. Is there a process or anything that you follow when somebody has a setback? Maybe they didn't get the job they wanted. Maybe they got removed from the team they wanted to be on. Didn't get whatever it was that they wanted. How do you work through those setbacks and move forward?
Well, I'm a big believer in everything that we're doing is a God thing. So I'm put here as a tool for to represent Jesus and God and live the life that based on the gifts that I was given, right? So I don't always know exactly what that is. My vision isn't 20/20 like I believe God's is, right? So anytime those failures happen, you have to process it, and sometimes that can be devastating. And just overcoming that and working through that can take a little bit of time, but what's on the other side is usually another door, right? The beginning of something is usually in the end of something else, or it's always in the end of something else, right? So beginnings always hide themselves in ends, I like to say.
I love that. Let's dive into faith because you mentioned God several times. I know we align on this, and I think God's uniquely equipped all of us with experiences, talents, and things that we're using today. And you're obviously using yours. But let's talk about where faith became important to you. Like, how did that start for you, and where does it fit into your life today?
Well, it was instilled in me as a child, and even I went to a Christian university, and then like anything else, you want to rebel from most things. So like the further I got away from my faith, the more lost I was, the more diluted life seemed, and the less focus I had on what I felt was my purpose. So even like now, something as simple as like this tithing, there's a certain commitment that I've learned, whether it's fitness, faith, anything. Like your faith is it's diverse. It's a lot of layers. Let's just take tithing, for example. No matter what's going on in life, tithing for us is a commitment, and we didn't always buy into it. We would always tithe based on what happened, or what we thought might happen financially. And, the more that we just, not blindly, but just that we commit to that, God always provides on the other side, right? So for us, it's about commitment.
I love that. And the obedience there. And I think, oftentimes, Nicole and I remember we were first getting married, is like tithing was hard. We didn't have any money coming in.
That's right.
I mean, it's all going out and you're like trying to balance and do all that stuff. But I've found that is like an act of obedience, right? And we learn it going up. But I love that you mentioned tithing, because a lot of times if our actions don't mirror what we say, there's this breakdown that occurs. So now I see you out there, and I see you coaching. I see you doing things with the kids and all that. And are you able to incorporate faith in? And how does that work for you as a coach?
Yeah, man, it's a part of me. So if you want me to coach your team, then that's a part of the package that you get, right? So I used to kind of hide from it because I didn't want to hurt anybody's feelings or offend anybody, I was worried way too much about how other people felt. Yeah. Instead of just doing what I believe I'm here to do and focusing on my purpose, So instead of feeding fear, feeding the purpose, and by feeding purpose, you feed faith, right? So it's just a part of me, and it's not something I want to throw down your throat or anything like that. But like again, if you want to get to know me, that's going to be a part of that process.
Well, I think it's also the name of the show, Finding Your Competitive Edge. It's part of your edge, and I tell everybody that is like that just becomes who you are. And I think about the listeners today. A lot of coaches listen. What advice or encouragement would you give them of their faith-based today? And they're like, man, I'm coaching. How do I start to bring that in ways, to your point, that I don't overwhelm people and it comes all about I'm not at church with them, but I am also there and I don't need to hide it either.
Well, the Bible's the greatest selling book of all time. They had to remove it from the bestseller list so other people could win. But like whether you believe in what's in it or not, I think everybody would agree that it's a great way to live your life by. It's a great example in which to live your life, right? Because it's focusing on others. It's focused on making things a better place, making this place a better place to live, and making life a better experience. It's a more wholesome life and fulfilled life, right? So it's a more purpose-driven life. So regardless of your faith or whatever it is that you believe in, I think it's a great roadmap of life.
Dude, I love it. So we had a kind of conference last weekend. I was speaking. It was about building a millionaire mind. And actually, two of the verses I pulled up, I was like, I could pull up quotes, and I just went back to Proverbs. Talking about idle hands and different things there, and expecting work without action. All this. We're going through. I'm like, those were the two best.
That's right.
Straight from Proverbs.
That's
so we
right.
might listen. I was like, guys, that landed. And I had a few people in the audience. I know they were not believers, but they're like, that was good. I'm like, yeah, that's in the Bible.
That's right. That's right.
So you can incorporate it in. So I love the faith piece. How does that look now as you're building out businesses and things? Are you looking to partner with people that are faith-based, or are you doing things that are non-faith-based, like the SiriusXM, y'all alternative? That's right. It kind of sounds like it might be a little different. Is that faith-based, or is that something separate?
No, it's not faith-based. I honestly have no idea what if anybody behind SiriusXM have a certain thing. Like I can tell you, when we're listening to the station from time to time, when we do, some of the lyrics will have some harsh language in them. It's kind of a cool concept. Yeah. Like it's not my job to judge. Okay, I believe that's for the creator to do. My job is not to do that. My job is to live by example, and I'm looking to learn more about other folks as well. So if your faith, if we can come together on faith, that's awesome, but it's not required. Okay, and honestly, like, you got to go and do things for folks. And if you want to bring people to faith, you're not going to where that people are already at that have it, right? You're going to those other places.
Dude, I love that. I picked up about you very early on too. That's why I wanted to bring that out, is because I think a lot of people are like, I'm only going to do business with people that are, faith-based. And it's like, man, wouldn't it be great if we were able to kind of spread the gospel and actually bring other people in, and there's opportunities there. So yeah. I love how you're doing that.
Mission trips aren't usually the places that are deep in faith. You know what I'm saying? They go to places that need it.
Yeah.
Right. So it's a great way to do that. It's a great outlet.
Yeah.
To share that stuff.
I think it's huge. Well, I know you and I align on this. Family.
Absolutely.
And man, I get this, and I'm sure you do, Nick. It's like people asking all the time, how do you do all these things? You got a family, you've been married over 15 years, right?
Yeah, right. Well, actually, so we've been together for a long time. Next year's our 10-year anniversary.
And that's what it was.
We did everything backwards, and a lot of it just to income restrictions.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So next year is our 10-year anniversary, but my wife's been putting up with me for the better part of 2 decades.
That's what I was like, okay, I knew it was an important one coming up, but you think about, a decade, staying together, and in today's world, you look at statistically, it's hard for people to do that. What are some of the things you've learned going through that 2 decades being together, but now celebrating 10 years?
Well, one, there's work. You have to work on things to grow them. Okay, so that means there's a lot of attention and focus on our relationship. So, and it's the hardest probably right now for us because our 2-year-old knows exactly what she wants but don't know how to communicate it, and man, she keeps us on our toes. Our son was super easy, like we could do anything to him and he would just go with it. My daughter, that is not the case. She's given us a run for our money. And I see my wife taking on, especially like if I'm coaching third base for 4 hours on a Saturday or even 6 hours on a Saturday, and she's dealing with that all by herself. She's trying to watch her son play. She's dealing with an unhappy 2-year-old daughter. She's a saint, man. And like I'm still getting to know her in deeper and deeper fashions, right? So I'm still getting to know her. I'm finding myself looking at her and just seeing new things that I've never seen before. It's the coolest thing. So she's evolving as a person as well within herself, and I get to constantly get to know that amazing person every single day. So for us, it's just big time work.
I can see how you light up when you talk about Reese. So it's
Absolutely.
one of those. And I love that you said that because there is a curiosity. I remember a mentor of mine sharing that. I was like, curiosity about your spouse, because you're both going to grow. Mm-hmm. And are you growing together or are you growing apart? And it is getting to know them because they're changing. And the person you married 10 years ago is not the same person today, nor are we. And so I love that you bring that up because a lot of people are like, well, they're just not the same anymore. Yeah.
That's right. Wouldn't it be devastating if we were?
I would be very alarmed if I was the same person 10 years ago as I am today, right?
Yeah,
and that growth that goes through. So I love that. You guys, I always get this question too about date nights and different things. What are some of the secrets and things to getting to know them and staying close and building that relationship?
We plan them for sure. However, we're not like we have to do one every week or one every month because then it turns into almost like a job, right? So the spontaneity of it is really unique for us. And we just like, we ask each other how we're feeling. We talk about it's something that we need to do together from time to time, and we're due right now.
Yeah.
So it's something that we're planning right now. Like in the next couple of weeks, we're just going to take an evening and go have fun together, for a few hours and come back. And it's just a great way to connect. And, you're living life and it's chaos and we're both going in different directions all the time. And we're going in a lot of the same directions all the time. And sometimes you just need to pause and bask in it and enjoy it and talk about it and see what's going on,
Too, even with the 2-year-old, I can remember with ours, 2-year-olds, once you know this because you got an old one. Once you get through that, the 2-year-old, that age is one of the toughest because you're right. You're just not communicating on all the cylinders. Like, we need to go. And yesterday we had a soccer game, so Nicole just jumped in. We had taken the doors off the Jeep. So we just rode down to the game together, like 45 minutes downtown. Like, I know it's not a date, but we're hanging out, we're talking, we're not interrupted by cell phones, we're not interrupted by other people. I think too often people miss those as they go through. So I love that you say, because I've heard people say, you got to program in the date night. It is every this, that, and the other. I'm like, man, if that works for you, awesome.
Right.
I know Nicole and I are more spontaneous. We're like, hey, this canceled, this opened up. We're going to go do something.
There it is.
And it's just a quick, hey, we're going to go grab a meal together. We're going to go on a walk with our dog together.
That's right.
So I love those that you incorporate in. What are maybe some of the others for newlyweds you think back? Because I know some of my friends reach out, they just got married. And I'm like, okay, you're in the game now. What are some of those things you wish you had known when you guys got married early on?
I was just very immature as a man back then. So, and she was always way more mature than I have been, and still is today. Just know that the person that you're marrying, you're just scratching the surface, man. Life really starts. It's a whole new life that starts after that. And there is that, people say it's hard. That's what makes it worth it, man. It's what you conquer together, right? So all those, like the newlyweds, like enjoy the newness, right? But that newness doesn't have to stop because each person evolves and you learn new things and you like new things together, and make sure you're dreaming big together. Make sure you do as much together as you can.
Yeah, dude, I love that. And I've noticed you guys, you do work together, which for some people, like, oh man, I couldn't work with my spouse. That would be difficult, but you guys have done that. And you've also done that, I noticed, with your brand. And I'd love to touch on this because, I've been following along since we connected up, and I love that you're putting yourself out there and you're sharing things that you're learning. You're sharing things that you believe.
Yeah.
You're sharing things that you're doing as you're coaching. I think that was one of the first videos I saw was you out there giving a pep talk in this talk. And I'm like, dude, this is really good. More of our kids need to hear this stuff. So let's talk about where that started for you, because I think a lot of people listening are like, hey, I want to get out there. I want to coach. I want to build my brand. I want to do that. Where did building your brand start to come from, and why did you do it?
Well, as far as I played for a lot of great coaches, and and Coach Burt says everybody needs a great coach in life, and I agree with that.
Yeah.
So I still reference a lot of the things that those coaches instilled in me 20, 30 years ago, even though at the time I didn't realize I heard it. I just didn't know how to apply it because life hadn't happened yet. So those people, those were amazing influences today. I still keep in touch with them, all of them, and they're great human beings. And so for me, it was like, well, if they did it for me, I've got to do it for somebody else, right? And then that turned into, how can I help those people if they don't know who I am, and I'm not clear, and I don't know who I am. Yeah. So I just had to figure out exactly, like, again, focusing on my purpose. I'm put here for a reason. And through the sports and all those things, coaching is definitely going to be a piece of that. So I take all the things that those people that I look to as not just coaches, but mentors, life leaders, all those things, and how do I apply that? But then it's like, well, I want to help more people. So how do I do that? And then that's where the marketing and the brand building and all those things come from.
I love it. Who was maybe one of your most impactful coaches you think about?
Honestly, man, my father was a great one. He was my coach all the way. He coached me even all the way through college. We had, in college you play for a college team, and then you go and you do some kind of really competitive elite summer thing. And Dad was always the guy. There was nobody that could do it better. I had an amazing high school coach and a guy named Danny Burns that's retired now, but he was a college teammate of my dad's. Yeah. Ryan Gray was my first coach at Trevecca, and he gave me a shot when nobody else would, and I learned a lot from him. And then the great Jeff Forehand, who's now coaching at Lipscomb University, was my coach for the next 3 years at Trevecca. And he's somebody that I still am pretty close to today, closer than a lot of, even some of my friends that I grew up with. So they're just very, like, they tell me when we do things great. They'll speak up if they say, hey man, I think you're better than that. Yeah. They're great with that.
That's the best coaches too. I feel like they give you that balance of, okay, here's real truth.
Absolutely.
But they're also coming alongside like, hey, I think there's more in you as you go through. And your dad he was pretty solid baseball player and football player, right?
He played, he was like back then, All City was a big deal in football. He's small. I'm a lot bigger than him. But he played college baseball at Lipscomb University, and then was just a student of the game. Had a great relationship with the great Ken Dugan and a whole bunch of other folks. I mean, what he was doing was way ahead of its time when he was doing it for us. And even old teammates that I still keep in touch with from those days went off and played college, and some of those guys played professional as well. And they all look at Coach Mickey as like, he was one of the biggest influences in their life.
I love that. Yeah, my dad was involved early, and he'll say to this day, he's like, I got you to a certain level, and then I checked out.
Absolutely.
Right.
And, Dad couldn't have done all those things if Mom hadn't done what she did to hold everything together.
That's right.
So it was and they didn't always have the best relationship, but I don't think they realized how great of a job that, or a great of an opportunity they created for so many people just because of what they did together, even though they were apart doing it.
Yeah. And then think about what you can do now. Look at how far your dad got you, and then now what you're able to do for your son, like, then maybe your daughter picks up whatever sport or does something after too, right?
It's so cool. We just got back from Memphis playing at the Team USA training facility out there, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
We're at an event. We're playing against, he's 13 years old. We're playing against a team from Oklahoma and all over the United States in a super competitive tournament. It was a lot of fun. And, and I'm the guy that gets to coach that, and it's because we represent a great organization in Midland baseball, which they're out of, they're not from Nashville, they're from out of state. And we have almost like a Nashville kind of a franchise type thing.
Yeah.
But, it means a lot to wear that badge because it's been around for, I think like 50 something years or something. And there's a legacy in that program. So being able to, be asked to do that, I get asked to do that. I don't do it every year. If I wanted to coach and they didn't want me, I might go somewhere else. But they asked me to do it, and that's a great compliment, And then that comes with a great responsibility to these young men and these families.
Yeah, I think it's a good reflection on you too, though, that they ask you to come back. I always say, when they ask you to come back, that means you've held the standard and you've got it. So, Curious, last book that you've read?
The last book I read was I just finished Kiyosaki's Rich Dad Poor Dad for like the 14th millionth time.
Oh my gosh!
Because been on the road a lot, I was listening to it over and over again. I went back and read the Covey's seven Habits of Highly Effective People again, and I'm about to go back and redo the Strangest Secret by Earl Nightingale, and then I actually want to go pick that one back up again. That one right there on the desk right there. Yeah, man.
Well, I love Rich Dad Poor Dad, and as you're saying that, I was like, oh my goodness. I just had my friend Vic Keller was on there, and he was talking to Kiyosaki about some of the things, and it was on his show. I'm like, how did these guys connect up? Very, very fascinating. But you're right, reading those books over and over, depending on what season of life you're in, is when you're going to get some of those things there. And so that was a big book for me. And we were just talking about last weekend, oddly enough, right, at the Millionaire Mind conference. It's like, where would that be? So I love those books because I think what we're reading is typically leaders or readers. I think about that as they go forward. And anything that we're reading, I'm always wanting to share with people. So I'm always curious about that. What's been different about reading Rich Dad Poor Dad this 14th, 15th time?
Yeah.
Because I know as I go through books, I typically pick out something. What's a good lesson now in this season?
So, well, just like anything else, like everybody has those movies that if they're scrolling through live TV, if it's on, they stick it and they watch it, right? Yeah. So at one time, a long time ago in life, I was like, I watch these movies over and over again. Why aren't I reading the books over and over again? So I just really just kind of thought like, why is that action not converting into, why am I not doing that in another space? And the coolest thing about Rich Dad Poor Dad, I'm a listener more than a reader. I like to be working out, walking, or something like that when I'm doing it. I got to be moving. I have a hard time thinking when I'm sitting still. So, every time that something sticks out to me, that's usually what I focus on, and I might miss the next thing that might stick out, and so on and so forth. So for me, every time something sticks out, I kind of get like obsessed with it until I really grasp it and understand it, and I study it. And then when I come back to the book the next time, I've already kind of gone through that process with that moment, and then maybe in the next chapter, something else pops, and I get to go through that same process over and over again. So I haven't had a book yet where I've listened to it all the way through and thought, well, I think I'm finally done with it. You know what I mean? It's the same thing. It's just like the Bible. Every time you keep getting something new out of it, a new way to apply whatever it is that you learn in there to life. And because you're always in a different life circumstance or life space or life place as well too, right? So when you're reading it this time and you're in a different place than you were last time, like of course you're going to get something new out of it.
Yeah, I love that because there's been several books I've gone back to and I'm like, man, this time I'm reading it. How did I miss that before? Or you hear it in this season, you're like, okay, this applies right now to the situation. And so for everybody listening, if there's a book out there, maybe it's Rich Dad, Poor Dad, maybe it's 7 Habits, those, go back and read them because those are the ones that may not have spoken to you as much. Obviously the Bible. I mean, I'm pulling out 2 Proverbs verses.
That's right.
And I'm like, it was right before I was speaking too. And I remember thinking, okay, God, there's a reason why those are going to speak to someone today. So go back and learn those. How's it different being a coach than you played at a pretty high level? I mean, obviously a lot of people would love to play D1, playing at Trevecca, playing professional. How is it different shifting from player to coach?
It was different, and I'm probably way better at it now than I was when I started. But people kept giving me opportunities, and you're always going to grow no matter what it is that you're doing. The longer you do it, and the more effort you put into it. So it was, for me, it was a passion. That passion as a player was the same as a coach. So it wasn't too big of a difference, even though it was just, you're just in a different place. And what I found out, we were, my first coaching job after I was playing was I was a paid dude that coached a really good travel team and 14-year-olds, and I carried them all the way up to like 17 or so. And I was also coaching at a local high school here with a buddy of mine. And I used to catch myself like I was sitting in the dugout and I'm like, I can't read the game from here. I got to go sit. I'm going to go behind home plate for a minute so I can just see things, because that was my view as a player. So for me, it was always taking those things that made me a good player and figuring out how to apply those as a coach, right? So and also like how I prepared, that was a big thing. Like all the lessons I learned about preparing for a season or a game or a series or whatever it was, that was the biggest thing, is most players just don't know how to prepare. They might be really good players, but they don't know how to prepare. And eventually you end up being with a whole bunch of really, really good players, and the most prepared are usually the ones that excel.
Oh, isn't that the truth? I love that you touched on this, because I want to go deeper on this, because this is something I learned early with my dad and visualization and things of, you're right. I mean, once you get to a certain level, everybody's fast, they're strong, they're good at what they do.
That's right.
And that preparation, I do think it's starting earlier. because when we were coming up in the game, I do feel like you start to learn that maybe in college, right? You have a coach that goes, hey, we're going to introduce how we prepare. We're going to watch film. We're going to do more. Now, I mean, it could be 12, 13, 14 years old.
Correct.
And they're being introduced to there. So what are you seeing? And we'll stay with baseball since I love this. And preparation.
Yeah.
What are the best doing now? Maybe even those younger athletes to prepare.
It's got to be a mix of, the kids don't play the sports in their backyard as much as they used to. So it's there. You fall in love with it there. You don't fall in love with it when you're up against the best of the best and your parents, everybody's screaming from the stands and there's all this pressure. You fall in love with it way before that. And a lot of the way that, especially here in the States in baseball, the travel ball world is kind of geared towards like it's a short season, but it's a whole lot of activity, and like there's more injuries now than ever because kids aren't playing it as much on the side. They're only doing it when they're competing, right? So there was I think it was Tom House, who's a brilliant baseball mind, that said kids are pitching too much but not throwing enough. Right? Throwing is just going out and throwing a baseball and playing catch, long tossing, just doing stuff. If every time you go out and you have a baseball in your hand and you throw that baseball, it's to try to get somebody out and you're trying to make it spin and move and all that stuff, it takes a lot of toll on your arms and your joints and everything else. And as a kid, like, I was never hurt. Kids are hurt all the time. There's a big difference between hurt and injured. Hurt you play, injured you don't. And and even when people are coming back from injuries, things heal tight. So it's when you're first breaking it back in, it sucks.
Yeah.
But people confuse that with being injured. So you got to learn a lot about your body. You got to be able to push limits. And very rarely, as an athlete, you would know this. In a long season, maybe 3 or 4 times a year, everything just clicks and you're just on. That's right.
Yeah.
The rest of the time is when you got to get it done when you don't have your best stuff or you're not having your best day, and that's what champions do. And man, that's life. That's business, right?
Isn't that the truth? But I love that you said this earlier, is falling in love with the game. Mm-hmm. And how many times, and I was watching our youngest, our 7-year-old, he's out there just playing soccer in the backyard, right?
That's right.
They got this little goal, and him and his buddy are just kicking the ball. They're switching. One's in goal, one's out there. I'm like, and I just thought about that as you were saying. I was like, we used to play all the time.
All the time. There was bare spots in the backyard.
Oh, I mean, you would just play, to play. I mean, you play any sport, basically, to kind of get out there. And so I do think that's really cool as you went through it. And then I love the preparation piece, because people today, you're right. They just want to show up to practice and games, right? And they think that's the way to do it. And it's like, man, all this stuff that can happen off the field.
That's right.
And when you fall in love with the game, you're right. There's not going to be this perfect season that everybody dreams of. I'm going to play every game perfect as you go through it there. And we talked about how to turn those setbacks into setups for people. We talked about that earlier. I'm curious, as you're looking at athletes today, college, this is something I'm really kind of watching, fascinated, because the sport's changing, right? I mean, look at all the athletes. There's D1, D2, all these different things there. Has the game evolved in baseball like I feel like it has in soccer quite a bit, to where, I mean, I look at some of these college athletes, I'm like, they are bigger and stronger and faster than we were.
Absolutely. There's way more knowledge that's accessible. I mean, even big leaguers didn't have the knowledge that we have, that these kids have now. You know what I mean? I know. But like, so there's all these analytics and science. The biggest thing that I would caution people to do is, like, everything, anybody can make something sound good and even look good in a video. Like, you got to have trusted sources, proven trusted sources to get your information from and to learn and grow from. So, and then when you find that source that you got to do, you got to commit to the finish before you're like, I don't know if it's for me, let me try something else. There's a certain commitment level to get to. Did you quit or did you finish? Yeah. And that's a very thin line that we focus on a lot between, I don't like quitting, but I love finishing, and they look and smell very, very similar.
Don't they though? I think people have been through that. And it's probably the same in business. I think about your experience in insurance sales and leading sales teams, and now with RAC Financial and all that stuff. What leadership principles maybe you learned in sports? I always love these correlations. Now, as you're leading a sales force and you've got a team and you've led teams in the past, what are some of those lessons that correlated from sports over now running business?
Well, first of all, like, I had to learn to fall in love with insurance. Okay. That was hard. Like
mortgage, same thing.
Oh my gosh. Like, it was like when I first got into it, I was just like, what am I doing? Like, is this really it? Like, is this? But no, man, it was, for me, it was an opportunity. Two of the greatest things you can get in life is an opportunity and a choice. And so I got an opportunity and I had a choice to make, which was, do I go all in and learn this and fall in love with it so I can make an impact? And by God, I fell in love with it. I found out, I was like, man, like, you can totally help people. This is a massive problem that we solve, and like we can like literally save people's financial lives through this. You know what I mean? So for me, it was not just a means to an end, but and the model that was created for us was like an entrepreneur's dream. I had invested in businesses and lost a lot, won a few, lost a lot, but here, like it was like entrepreneurism on like steroids. Like you could literally go in and like you had half the investment, or not even half, a fraction of the investment to pour into these people, and you could still get a really great return on it, right? So it was way less risk. It was just, but it was an amazing opportunity to be able to just keep pouring into these folks, and then have an opportunity to get return on them, and have a great partnership with them for a very long time. So falling in love with insurance for me, and then how the sports play into that, it's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard. And, but you can work through life's hard. That's what makes it worth it. And, in sports, I always learned that like the people that get to the next level, they're the people that like, they just have an impact on the game because they're there. Whether it be mentally, physically, whatever it may be, they have a direct impact on the outcome of the game just by being present in the game. And so for me, I noticed the same thing in the people that were killing it in the insurance space at the time that were there before me. I was like, well, I can totally say if this was a baseball team or versus a bunch of insurance agents, all right, well, these were the guys that stood out and went to the next level, and these are the guys that stood out and got promoted, So there's a lot of similarities there.
Well, I love what you touched on there, because actually, I think it was Ed Milet the other day was sharing this, and I really resonated. He talked about falling in love with what you're doing, whether it's insurance or mortgage, is fall in love with the parts of it and find the parts that you love.
That's right.
Because the reality is you're not going to love everything about it. Because there's parts of it that are like compliance and paperwork and all that stuff. I don't know that I'll ever fall in love with that part, but I love people. I love helping solve problems. You said that.
That's right.
And so I chose through that, and that's what I was hearing you say. It's like, you just choose the parts that you go, you know what, this is where I'm going to go all in on.
That's right.
I'm going to help people, and I love helping people win. So that's both in the team and externally. And I was going through as you were saying, I was like, man, that is so good for people to realize, because everyone wants to fall in love with this career, and they don't realize that, man, there's parts of it that you're going to love. And then you said the harder piece. And we were laughing before this started. No one cares. Work harder.
That's right.
I mean, that's the truth, right? I mean, sports, and I think about in business, is nobody really cares what you're doing until you've done it. But you always got to continue to work harder. And I could hear you saying that. And I think back to, too, you're going back and reading books again. You're going back and studying. And as I listen, you're a student. That's the edge that you've got that's there. Was that something you've always had, of constantly learning and growing as being an athlete, and that just transitioned to business? Or is that something you've had to develop and learn?
I took a lot for granted in the world of sports, that I've gone back and dug and relived those moments in my head and learned to apply those. Having a family has been, we used to sit, my wife and son who was growing up, we used to sit in the same sermon in church, and it dawned on me one day, I was like, hey, like, let's talk about what we just heard, and like, what'd you learn? And it was 3 different things. So it was 3 different translations to this exact same words that were spoken out of one person's mouth when we were sitting there, and how we were going to apply those. So now, like every time a sermon's over at church, one of the first things we do is we get in the car on the way to lunch or whatever we're going to do is, hey, what'd you get out of that? So there was, I realized I was doing a keynote one time. I was talking to like 35, 40 people. And we were talking about the word mindset. And I looked out there, and I don't know why, I saw all these expressions on their faces that were different. And I thought, hey man, like, what's your definition of the word mindset? I asked like 8 people. I got 8 different answers. So I was like, we need to like define what this word means so we can talk about the same thing and then move forward from there. So like that was the foundation. Then as I thought about it, all the great coaches, all the great CEOs that I had access to, all the mentors, and like even like when you watch a show on television, or is it TV? I'm maybe old. Is it still television? I don't know.
Either one. I think we say both.
But when you watch a show, they're going to show you, like, they're going to say, hey, up to this point in the season, they give you a recap. Yeah. And then this is where we're going from there. All the great leaders and coaches that I had, we started a season, said, this is the goal of the season, and here's how we're going to get there. And they would always say, this is where we're at in that journey, so that we know where to pick up where we left off, right? That was a very valuable lesson to me. Once I started doing that and I started applying that, things started to grow.
I love that. And how applicable is that right now? We're almost midway through the year. Probably by the time we release this, we're going to be midway, basically, give a week or two. And I think about how many people decelerate in Q2. They get to the middle of the year and they're like, oh, crap.
Yeah, summer happens. All of a sudden the lake's open and people make different decisions just because of the of season and the time of year. Plan for those things. You know what I mean? Plan for those things. This is the hardest time of the year for me to keep movement going as fast as we do, because when you coach a team like that, we're out of town 3 or 4 days a week. You know what I mean? And we're on the field all day. So like I'm returning phone calls in spare time. It's a whole, like, you got to be surrounded with great people that are all on the same page and know where you're at in that journey to keep things moving forward, right? So in moments like this is when I lean on all my team and everybody around me the most. And if you got great people and the infrastructure's there, this is when they shine anyways, right?
Yeah, that's what you want. I've often found great athletes that have had great coaches like you've had, they make great leaders because you've seen it and you've been modeled. I saw this stat, I think I was reading it over the weekend, Nick, and it was talking about if you sat within, I think it was 25 or 50 feet of a top producer, right? A great leader, someone there, your productivity would automatically go up 25%. Automatically, just by being in proximity to them.
Yeah.
It was the first time I'd seen an actual study where I go, okay, we all know proximity is power, being around people that are smart and doing all the stuff that you want to do. That's cool. They said the same was true. If you're around low producers,
absolutely,
and your production was here, you're going to drop 25% by being around. So imagine dropping a top athlete around all low producers.
It's incredibly important to make sure that you're a part, that the people that you're hanging with and spending a lot of time with are a part of your future, not your past. So and people have been pissed at me for saying that. Like, there's people that I went to high school with that I love. I just don't spend time with them right now, a lot of time with them right now, and that's by choice, because they're going that way and I'm going this way. Like, how am I going to get there if I'm hanging out with people that are going in a different direction? It just doesn't work, and it's not a knock on them or anything else. That's just life. That's where they say you grow apart comes from, right? But and guess what? Growing, they call them growing pains, right? So growth hurts most of the time, and if you grow apart, that can hurt, right? So that's why it's so important to feed your marriage and work on your marriage, because you will grow apart quickly.
And that's the cornerstone. And I was talking about this last weekend, is hanging out with your future self. Fastest way to do that is to hang out with people that are already doing what you want to do.
That's right.
At that level. People have been married longer than you have. Maybe they've got a deeper connection with God. They've got a better discipline around reading the Bible and doing things. Their fitness is at a level you're like, dude, I need to hang around. What are you eating and what are you doing? I can learn some things by hanging around you. And business is the same. You hang around those people long enough, you're going to start believing and doing some things that they do.
That's exactly right.
That they move forward. So I want to put a plug in, because RAC Financial, you guys are doing some cool things.
Thank you.
And I think it's changing, because I remember learning about when I was in the bank, learning about merchant services and all that. So let's break it down for people, like what RAC does, how that can help them solve problems today. If they're listening and they're like, hey, that's me, let's help some people solve some problems.
For me, it was a mind-blowing thing, just like it was in insurance. In insurance, I was a bad consumer, okay, before I learned the business. And then once I became an advisor and an agent, all the things that I learned, I was like, my goodness, we've been making poor decisions this whole time. How many people are like me that are doing the exact same thing? As a business owner, when it came to setting up how we were just going to receive payment, it was like you do a Google search and we got a couple options right there that populate at the top, and we can call the bank and they can do that. Nobody really ever explained to me, like, dude, like there's, based on whatever type of business that it is, how long you've been in business, how long, like what type of revenue you're doing. As your revenue grows, like, all these different options become available in the world of how you receive your payments, especially the digital ones, which, like cash, it's very rare to do a cash transaction in a lot of businesses. So for me, the reason that we fell in love with the folks at RAC Financial, because we've worked with other ones before, is one, Rebecca and Carrie are just amazing people, but they have a very amazing track record in the industry. And they just have the best relationships with the banks. That those banks have to want the business of the processing that's happening from the customers paying a business. They have to want the business of that business, right? So and based on what type it is, like, that bank may not deal with that industry, right? So having a lot of different options and experts and knowing, and they just had all the relationships that really made it valuable to us as business owners, and it was very attractive. And then there was some growth opportunities within the company that it was a great partnership for us to work together. So I'm still learning. I learned something new from Carrie Cole, the COO. I learned something new from them every single day. and we're dealing with stuff in crypto. We're international. It's not just restricted to the U.S. Excuse me. It's just a great opportunity. It truly is, to be able to just, all these business owners and great minds that have come up with all these concepts. I get to spend that time with them now, and really, like, what excuse did I have to do it in the past?
I love it. When you're helping people solve problems, and for some people listening out there, they're like, yeah, man, we're collecting payments over here. We've got people paying us, and whether they're doing coaching programs, they've got, money flowing in. They don't realize they're losing to fees and different things there. So who would be maybe an ideal or targeted customer that would benefit?
If you didn't have somebody like me that explained this to you and like could shop all the options that are actually available to you, like there's a whole lot, especially depending on what type of industry you're in. And I didn't know that, when people buy something from a business and then they cancel the transaction later, I didn't know that like there's underwriting in this, just like there is in insurance and mortgage and credit and all those things. So I didn't even have a clue with that. So when we figured out that, like, hey man, we need to move all of our business over to RAC Financial, the knowledge that we learned, it was just like, man, like, how do we get this out there to those folks, right? So I believe in doing that with a big, awesome, gigantic field force. So that's what we're working on building out for them right now.
I love it. We'll definitely put a link in there, guys. So as you're listening, we'll put a link so you can learn more and obviously help promote that. Because if we can help people save money, I always say, if we can help you save money, then you can invest it smarter, give it to people that need it, and we're changing the world. Man,
on average, regardless of the type of industry, just small averages, being super conservative on it, anywhere from 2 to 3% savings. Man, look, think about the revenue over the course of a year, over 3 years, over 5 years. Like anywhere else, it's like making 2 to 3% interest on your money that you're not making right now. It's a great thing, and some companies can save way more than that. Those just small conservative things. The numbers I'm throwing out there, right?
I love it, guys. If you're listening to this and you're like, hey, how can I save? This might be something for me. Make sure you reach out to Nick and I, because we will help you and make sure that we get you the right information. That could be your halftime audible that you go, okay, it's halftime. I'm making good revenue, but I've got some expenses I need to reinvest places. This could be a line item you look at and say, oh man, let's fix this.
There's a whole employee's payroll that might be freed up by doing this, right? You can maybe add a whole person, and what would that person do to the growth of your company?
Tremendous. Dude, I've loved this conversation, because athletes that have gotten to the level you've gotten to, running businesses, family man, dad, coach, all these things. I'm so excited about this SiriusXM. I cannot wait to check that out. Let's talk about the podcast before we wrap up, because I know a lot of people, I was a guest on there and you've had some phenomenal guests. Let's talk about that a little bit so people can, one, know what it is and who that might be for.
Well, your episode was killer. It's one of my favorite episodes, right? And I can say that not just because I'm sitting in here right now. It was dynamite. My podcast is by far the sharpest tool in my tool belt. By having my podcast changed our life. It changed our trajectory, just because, like, you got to have relationships to get to where you want to go, talking about who you hang out with, right? So wanting to make all the relationships in my life with people that have accomplished what I want to accomplish, the podcast gave me a reason to reach out to them and get to spend an hour or longer with them, and then grow a relationship from there. And then you end up finding out, like, you have a lot of things in common, and like, man, friendships develop and all those things, all from a podcast. And without that podcast, I didn't have a real reason to call them up and get to hang out with them, because I didn't really have it. The podcast is a way to bring value to those people's lives. And outside of the podcast, it can be really hard to do that, without saying, hey, can I sell you something? Can I work with you in a certain way? For me, there was, interviewing somebody on the podcast, there's nothing in it for me, man. It's here to focus on you. And I want to share all the things that you've done, the impacts you've made with my listeners and my audience. Like, it's what we can do for other folks. So it's a great way to collaborate. And then you're linked to those people forever on that episode. Yeah. So it's an amazing thing.
Dude, I love it. And so we've got the 100th episode coming up pretty soon. I know you're nearing on that. We're climbing towards 100. So if you guys are not following Hitstreak, make sure you follow Nick on there. Make sure you subscribe. We're going to put a plug in. Make sure you like, subscribe, do all that stuff. But what I love too is that you've stayed consistent. There's this theme when I think about people's competitive edge, and what you've got consistently. Rereading books you didn't have to reread. Thinking back to coaches and lessons you've done. And you're not only taking what I say is, we're kind of drowning in information out there, but people are starving for wisdom. And you're actually applying wisdom and going and doing it. And so kudos to you, because I think that's what most people are looking for, is like, how can I flex my competitive edge? What is it? if you just go back through and think about what Nick shared today, there's evidence of success, but now you're continually leveling up and applying that today. What do you think your competitive edge is?
I was always taught, there's an old story from when I was a kid that my dad's buddies told me about one time, where dad was a kid and he came from not much. And there was a bigger kid that was, basically they were getting into it a little bit. And basically the guy said, "Hey man, I'm going to kick your butt," with other words. And one of my dad's buddies looked at him and said, "I don't think you should do that." And the guy said, "What, you don't think I can kick his butt?" And he said, "No, I'm sure you can. It's just going to take you all day." Right? So for me, Mark Lemke was a guy that played for the Atlanta Braves in the 90s. And Mark Lemke was famously quoted for saying, like, "I'm here because I was the last man standing. I just didn't quit. I stayed. I wasn't finished." So for me, my competitive edge is like, you may be bigger, stronger, faster, but I'm just going to outlast you. I will be the last man standing no matter what. And I have no problem saying that. And I'm open for the challenges or anything else that comes with it, man. It's like when I commit to something, we go all in. When I started the podcast, the biggest reason people's podcasts don't work is because they quit. Like 100 episodes, we're just getting started. You know what I mean? And it's been a lot of work. That's 2 years. As soon as we released our first episode on a Tuesday, we have not stopped. Every Tuesday like clockwork for 2 years. It's a big commitment. Commitment's required. To have greatness on any level, right? So if you start your podcast, don't even look up for 100 episodes. Just know that that's the minimum required to start.
I mean, that's like a mic drop the bomb right there. I think as I listen back and you're talking about that, you're very clear on what you've done, what you've accomplished, but more importantly, you're clear about where you're going. And I think for many people, they're going to listen back to this and be like, okay, I can go back through my own life. And maybe I wasn't a D1 professional athlete or doing these things that Nick's done, but it doesn't matter. What have you done? What are the trails that you've blazed and gone through? And I love that you said at the end of, man, I feel like that in my life sometimes too, of like, I'm just not going to quit. Like, I'll be the last one here.
That's right.
I may not be the fastest, strongest, tallest, whatever, most competitive in the sense of like physical attributes. But man, from a mental standpoint, we're going to stay in the game and fight.
Everybody has a uniqueness that makes you're one of one, right? So you got to figure out what that uniqueness is, and you got to exploit it. You got to be proud of it. You got to develop it, and you got to exploit it.
Yeah, I love it. Well, we're going to wrap because I know we could continue to go on forever, but I want people to go back and re-listen to this, take notes, let us know what you took away today, because Nick not only clearly articulated his journey where he's been, but he knows his competitive edge. Do you know yours? If you don't, reach out, let us help you with that. And that is your uniqueness. I believe God has uniquely equipped you with experiences, whether they've been good or bad, and you've had things in your life that have happened to you and not for you. And so we want to make sure those things have happened for your growth and for your benefit. They didn't happen to be a victim. You don't have to let those hold you back. Let us help you through that journey. This has been another amazing episode of Find Your Competitive Edge. Let us know what you took away, any guests we'd like to have in the future, and make sure you like, subscribe, leave a review, and we will catch you on the next episode.